This is Women in PR, a weekly podcast about inspiring women that have embraced PR and made it shine, changing it for the better every day. It's about mentors, founders, researchers, role models, leaders. I am Anna Adi. Women in PR is brought to you by Quadriga University of Applied Sciences in Berlin and professionalpodcasts.com. The C-suite. Is that something you strive for or you're invited in? And more importantly, as a communicator, how do you make yourself listened to once you get there? Do you need a PR degree or will on-the-job training do? And do you have to choose between your own values or those of the organization? These are some of the questions we'll be trying to answer in this episode with our guest, Dr. Edna Yahil. She's heading the marketing and communications at Pan-Alpina, based in Switzerland. And that is one of the largest providers of forwarding and logistics services. Well, that's ocean freight and intercontinental air to you and I. Edna is also the managing vice president of EACD, the European Association of Communication Directors, a network for communication professionals from all fields, promoting diversity, overcoming cultural barriers, and fostering professionalism in comms. Today, I'll ask Edna how she got to where she's at. So, Edna, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Anna.
Edna, before we start really asking the tricky questions, since the show is about stories and journeys of women in PR, tell me, how did you end up in PR?
So, Anna, I think like so many people in this field, it was quite a serendipitous journey. I originally studied history at university. I went to Stanford University in Northern California and did my degree in history. And then I went on to do a PhD in history at UCLA in Los Angeles. It was only towards the end of the time when I was writing my thesis, and I was living in France at that time because that's where I was doing my research, that I decided that I didn't want to go into academia, and I fell into a job at UNESCO, which is in Paris. It's the United Nations Education, Science, and Cultural Organization, and I fell into a job as a researcher. At UNESCO, sort of to complement my studies. So I was working, in the mornings and writing my thesis at night. I started as a researcher on a big project that was on ICT. I then moved into another department, onto a big literacy and education program at UNESCO. And very quickly, my hidden talent, if you was discovered. And that's that, because of my liberal education, because of the fact that I've been, educated in English, I'm really good at writing in English. And so I sort of by default was able to find my way first into the education bureau for UNESCO in the communications department. And then quickly I was promoted into the Bureau of Public Information. And I would say, the beginning was really the fact that I love writing. So it really came to it from that. And that's how I started. I think to get where I am, if I can continue a little bit, is an interesting story as well.
Tell me more about it.
Great. So, I was on and off in UNESCO and finishing my dissertation for about 4 years. And it was interesting, but I wanted to see what else was out there. A friend and colleague of mine in 2006 was offered a job at Shell. This is when Shell moved their headquarters from London back to the Netherlands, in their corporate affairs department. And he'd been in the culture section at UNESCO. And I'd had conversations with him and basically was thinking, this is really interesting because he's taking his skills in communications, but he's moving into a private organization. And I thought, I'd really like to do something like that. At the same time, my boss, at that point, I was working in the Bureau of Public Information as the main English editor. And my boss was a woman who's since retired named Sue Williams, who was responsible for all the press of UNESCO. And she said to me, Edna, have a think about what it is you really want to do, because you're really good at your job, but here, you're a unique contributor. You're not going to get management experience. So, and you're young for the level of job that you're currently sitting in. So you'll probably be sitting here for the next 10 years waiting to be, old enough to get to the next level. And I thought, that's not super exciting, but I wasn't in a hurry to leave. And it was one of the first meaningful career mentoring conversations that I had. So basically a boss who said to me, you're really in your comfort zone here, but if you wake up one day and you're 40 and you're still sitting in the same job and you've never had private sector experience and you've never managed people, you're not going to be marketable anymore. So sit and think really what you want to do, right? And so I sat and I thought, and I started to apply for jobs in Europe. My husband is French, and he was quite flexible, as long as he could continue with his career. And what I found very quickly is that my background was extremely marketable in the private sector. And I'll tell you the reason I think why that is, because at UNESCO I had worked at a very broad level across multiple markets. So, I was editing journals where I'd have one journalist working in Papua New Guinea and another one in Jamaica and in China. And so in a lot of the corporates that I interviewed with, including Philip Morris, which is where I eventually went, they had a lot of people who had deep industry knowledge, but had worked their way up, usually in a country organization. And so they were looking to have some diversity, at least Philip Morris at the time, in their corporate affairs staff at the global level, to have sort of young talents who had a more global view of the world rather than a deep experience within the industry. So that really kind of kicked off my career. And once I got into this big corporate, which was Philip Morris, then I started to learn different skills, different processes, project management, leadership. I started to manage teams, and really, it was at that point really that my career started to take off. So that the long and the short of it is how I started my career.
It's interesting, that you go back to the beginnings and how you say you've migrated basically or stumbled almost into PR. But there's something you said there about your husband being French that made me think. I remember you wrote also recently on one of your posts on LinkedIn about choosing to learn French and how that choice you made influenced very, very much your career. And so you talk about decisions that might seem trivial, that have a great impact on the future. So thinking in that vein of French, something that you've decided to learn, what other decisions have you taken that now in hindsight have been really influential for you?
Well, okay, there are a lot of decisions that have been influential for me. I think the first decision, and when I was 15, so in America, that's the junior year of high school, and I guess in Europe, it's the year before you finish your baccalaureate or your matura or abitur, whatever it is you do. So that year, I won a Rotary scholarship to go to India, and I spent a year in high school near Mumbai. By myself. So I mean, I was obviously hosted by 3 different host families. But, I had my pocket money. I was away from my parents for a year, and I was really, really, really independent. And that experience, so there were about, I think, 12 kids sent out from the Rotary Club that I belonged to in Long Island in New York that year to various countries. It was chosen at random. I got India. And that experience really changed my life, mostly because it opened my eyes up to the world. And, from then, I've been constantly on the move. And, you say I've been in Europe now for 19 years. And probably, I think if I hadn't gotten married, I probably would have left Europe and gone, off to Asia or somewhere else by this point. But that sort of desire to explore the world, to discover new cultures, really left a huge, huge, huge impact on me. And I think that's one. And the second big discovery for me, and it took a lot of time. As I said to you originally, I packed all my education into my early and mid 20s. So I started working fairly late because I did a PhD. My family is very educated, erudite. Both my parents have PhDs. My grandparents had PhDs. Like everyone kind of is a bit nerdy, right? But somewhere along the line, I realized that while I really enjoy the thought process of going through copious amounts of information, of writing, of thinking, of summarizing, of teaching, of explaining, I didn't like to work in isolation. I was spending days, morning to afternoon in the National Archives alone, having my sandwich in the courtyard alone for a couple of years. And I think what I love about the career that I have now is that I have those moments. I usually try to work 1 day a week from home when I really need to get my writing done. But I also get to be really social because I'm an extrovert and I get to interact with different people in different parts of the business and learn every single day. And that also has been a big eye-opening experience for me.
So apart from being social and still get an opportunity to write, what else do you like about PR and comms that keeps you, in a sense, in the business, in the industry?
Well, I think one of the things that I really like, and one of the reasons that I'm still client side after all these years, is I like really getting deeply into the business, right? We're not just doing fluff. I mean, in my team, I report to the CEO. I work individually with all of the members of the executive team. I'm involved with the board. I'm involved with crises. I'm involved with finding responses to socio-political or in our industry even geopolitical changes in the world, and I really just like the fact that no day is the same as the previous day. That, as you can see, I like to speak my mind. So it's a role where one is encouraged to be to challenge a bit some of the leadership, to show different points of view. In my career, I've had often people in the C-suite, ask opinions about how do employees feel, how do customers feel, what are they thinking, what are they doing, and really being in this role where you get to have a pulse on what's going on and influence it is something that I find very rewarding.
Now, it's interesting that you talk about being part of the board and challenging. I also remember you talking recently at an event of the EACD in Berlin at the European Communication Summit, when you said that the access and, in a sense, the integration of the PR comms
person into the C-suite is essential. And you were saying that you enjoy that position, that access. How do you get there? I mean, if we look around at a lot of the writings, from research and the professional side that come up and talk about the access and empowerment of the PR function, that seems to continue to be a struggle, even if the concepts of the empowerment of the function came about mid-'80s. So how do you get access, and how do you get the C-suite to listen and to work with you?
Well, I think there are several things. First of all, when you start your career, it's all about the hard skills. Do you know how to write? Do you know SEO optimization? Do you know how to manage an agency? And by the time you get to a job like mine, the assumption is you wouldn't be here if you didn't have that skill in your pocket already. You know what I mean? And but how do you get involved with people in the C-suite? The way you do it is by, first of all, being damn interested in the business, and in speaking their language and finding solutions that are meaningful to them. And I'm going to give you an example. When I interviewed for my current job, my CEO at the time, who didn't know me that well, asked me a question about KPIs and how would you set KPIs for the function. And I gave some very concrete examples, which is a little bit easier because I'm running both marketing and comms. But I tried to explain to him the difference between share of voice as a KPI and tonality, right? And he's a smart guy, but this was all sort of new to him. And he said, okay, I wrote my objectives. Then all of a sudden, that last fall, Panalpina started to have some crisis communication, and the pressure went on and on and on. And we were in the front page of at least the Swiss papers, on a weekly basis, some weeks on a daily basis. And I and my team were managing this night and day. And one day I'm in the CEO's office, and he said, I finally understand the difference between share of voice and tonality. And right now we have too much share of voice. And it was really meaningful, but it took a while for him to get it. That's one thing. The other thing is, and I've come in quite a few jobs where I replaced someone who had a more sort of traditional function, right? And really shifted the positioning of the function to be more strategic. And when you come into a new job and you meet the CEO and you meet the chief commercial officer or people who are running different parts of the business, it's really important to get their trust and to get some quick wins that are important to them as business people. Okay. So for example, you can say, oh my goodness, this company doesn't have a crisis communication plan. Okay. Or doesn't have any crisis communication. But if you sit there on day one and start to do something like that, they're not going to be very impressed with you. Right. So if you can find out what their hot topic business issues are, and try to start to address those in the beginning with quick wins, you build trust, and then you put in place the things that you do later on, right? So you need to have a plan, but then you need to be pragmatic in rolling out your plan so that you can first build trust with the people who will then later let you act on your plan. Does that make sense?
Do you have a story for that, an example of a thing that you have pursued which brought you the trust of those you were working with?
I have quite a few stories, but I think the most obvious one, at least for us here in Panalpina. So we were actually or are in the process of being acquired over the course of beginning in the fall of last year. We started to have a lot of pressure put onto us by an activist investor. And I think that I was lucky coming into this job because I had met the CEO before and had done some consulting work with him, so I already had that relationship. But I think it was really the way that I and my team started to deal with the media and collaborate with the CFO, who at the same time was dealing also with the investors, really helped to position and develop the trust that my team needed. So it really took a crisis, if you will. In other cases, in my previous jobs, when I was at EIT Digital, there was a need to sort of shift. My predecessor had focused a lot on event marketing, and there was a need to really shift the whole organization. I had people in about 12 countries in Europe and one in California to focus on PR, media work, brand building, and it was really by shifting everyone's attention to focusing on key issues, to structuring the department along with the way that the organization was structured, to putting in KPIs, this time for share of voice, in tier one media, and really getting kind of a weekly rhythm of going to the board at EIT Digital every Friday and saying, look, guys, we have this in France, we have this in Germany, we got into Le Monde, right? And week after week after week, we would report on results, and that just kind of feed it into just by persistence that we're making progress, that we're bringing results, and that it's something that should be discussed at the C-suite.
Now, there are a couple of things I'd like to follow up on, but they're different topics from your story. Okay. I'll go back to the first. You mentioned an activist investor.
Yes.
I'd like you to clarify that a little bit. What is that? We hear, one of the buzzier topics that we're dealing with this year is corporate activism. And so I wonder, how would you define corporate activism? And in that vein, what is an activist investor? What's the difference between them?
Well, so an activist investor is someone who has a certain portion of your shares, who then leverages on that in order to make changes either in the management or in the company. Okay, the U.S. is really the place where this is, rolling on very strongly. I am now, just to clarify, Panalpina is listed on the SIX, which is the Swiss stock exchange. And this is the first time that I'm responsible for a communications function that is listed in Switzerland. And there were huge learnings there. So we had an activist investor that had a little bit more than 10% of the shares, who was pushing basically for a sale of the company, which is eventually what happened. And they started to use different tactics, beginning with all in public, all in the Swiss press, some in the international press, and basically putting on the pressure on the board of directors to make certain changes or decisions. It started with attacks on our chairman. It also, there were also various attacks on corporate governance and various other issues. And at the end, their goal is to improve value for the investors and eventually make a change which leads to an increase in the share price. So in our company, eventually, after a period of many months, we were sold to a new company, DSV, or it is in the process of going through regulatory approval. That's what we mean by a activist investor. To me, corporate activism is something completely different. That is when corporations become very active in certain concepts or ideas, for example, sustainability.
Okay. Now, let's move a little bit from there, because, in a sense, when you talked about the activist investor as someone who has a clear, vetted financial interest into an organization and wants to steer it. And when you talk about corporate activism, you speak a little bit more about responsibility, so in a sense about corporate values. And now I'm thinking a little bit. You said you worked for Philip Morris sometimes in the past, which is currently one of the part of an industry that is trying to, I think, redefine itself.
Yes.
But also recently, you also wrote. I mean, I remember at the time when Trump was elected, Donald Trump, as president of the United States. You were still in Paris at the time, and you wrote quite openly about how you were opposing him. And I'm trying to formulate this question as clear as possible, but we're talking here about an alignment or misalignment from you as a communicator or employee to the organization and their values and their stakeholders. How do you see this balance? Where and what should the communicator do if, for instance, their values are not aligned with those of the organization? And in the other way, how can the organization create a bridge with their own employees and their stakeholders so that they reach that place where values are shared?
Okay, well, I think I need to unpack that because it's a little bit of a complex question. Let me just first of all go on the record saying that I still don't like the current president of the United States. However, in my current job, and when I did make those statements, I was working in a European organization, and I felt comfortable doing that. In my current job, we have many employees in Huntsville, Alabama, and we have people who have differing opinions, and so I think that today I would be less likely to make a statement like that, for example, on LinkedIn, because I'm a role model in my company, and employees might see that. However, I am a human being. I have the right to express myself, and in more private settings, or even quasi-private settings, like let's say Facebook or a conference, or on this webcast, I have no problems in articulating that. That's my political view. I think there's a very deep difference with corporate values. If I did not believe that my company is doing ethical or the right things or good things, I would not be able to do my job, period. No one is here to get stressed out each day by promoting a company that they don't believe in. Which gets us to the question of how could I have worked for a cigarette company for so many years? Because I worked for about 8 years total in tobacco. And I think you need to really unpack what the values are. And I'm not going to, get into the detail of Philip Morris's current campaign, because then we'd spend the rest of the podcast talking about that. But I can tell you that as an employer of choice, as a top employer, Philip Morris was one of the best companies that I've worked for. And the emphasis that they place on employees, employee development, leadership, internally is amazing. And when I joined, it was at the moment that they were really shifting their positioning to say, hey, we make a product that kills. We admit that the product kills. But if you make a choice to smoke, then we want to be there to help you find a potentially less harmful solution. And it's come a long way from there. So I think that it's also sort of which values matter to you as a person or not. I mean, and I'll bring a third element into that, which is to talk about the relationship between the head of comms, head of PR, and the CEO. When I see people in my position running into, very often it is not because they are not good at their jobs, it's because they have a difference in value from the CEO. And that's why, you have a few people. I'm thinking of the president of the EACD, who's been through, I think, 3 or 4 CEOs now in KPN in the Netherlands. So he's the exception that proves the rule. But very often, when you get a new CEO in the company, one of the first people to go is the head of comms, because it's not easy to make that transition and keep your value structure with a new leader. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. So, sort of to summarize, I think personal opinions, values, whatever, I think you can speak about publicly within reason. To have this job, I think you need to have the same values as the company. And I think you also need to have the same sort of value system and relationship with a CEO in order to be happy every day when you go to work.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. That is way clearer than I've been struggling to formulate it in the last months or so. Let me go back though to where we started, and that is you being in PR and comms. You mentioned at the moment you get into a position like yours, which is a leading position and has a management role as well. There's an assumption that you would have grown and acquired some harder skills on the way. Now, looking at the future and all these new emerging economic and business concepts that are growing, how do you think that's going to be? How do you feel your current role is being shaped by technology, by globalization? I guess what I'm asking is that do you think that it's still valuable and it's still going to stay on? We're still going to carry on in the following years this incremental growth into the profession?
Look, and I think there's a basic sort of liberal arts education that you need to have. Okay, I mean, I have struggled on many times coming into new jobs where I've eventually had to move people either out of my department or even end the relationship with the company because they couldn't write, right? So there's certain basic skills that, if you're not a good writer, go into HR, go into sales, do something else, but this is not the job for you. And now, I would say I spend maybe half a day maximum writing. But the fact is that that skill is in my pocket. So when I need to push out, a market relevant press release in 3 languages in an hour and a half, which I had to do a few weeks ago, I can do it in English and French and pull my colleague Sandra to do it in German, and we're good, right? So you need to have those basic skills. For the rest, it's part of prioritizing, knowing what you need to know, knowing where you can depend on people. I mean, I have a team that focuses on digital marketing, that does all of the analytics. And you know what? I do not know Google Analytics as well as they do. I do not go as deeply into the tools as they do, but I have enough, first of all, trust in the person who's leading that department, that they're doing what they should. And, I ask the sensible questions. And when I need to, I brush up on things that I need to know. So I think that, going forward, there's going to be more and more technology there, but, it's still the same sort of, you need to be a jack of all trades and prioritize and focus on what's really important. So that's
okay.
Yeah.
So if again you were to have the opportunity to travel back in time and meet your younger self, what would you tell yourself?
First of all, I would have had 2 kids and not 1. Which is really important because I meet a lot of very sort of young, and this is women in PR, young women who are really pushing forward in their career, and that's what I was like in my 20s and early 30s. I have a daughter who's going to turn 12 in a couple of weeks, who is just amazing. And so the first thing I think I would tell my younger self is that, if your career is slowed down by another year or 2 because you have a second child, it's not going to be the end of the world. So that's the first thing. On the personal side, on the professional side, what I wish I had done at some point earlier, it would have been to step out for, a development assignment for a year or 2 years into a role that has P&L responsibility. I do a lot. We do the investor relations as well with finance in my department here, and I really enjoy that. But I wish that I had some real sort of just hands-on, MD P&L type experience earlier in my career, because I think it would have made me even stronger in terms of the business acumen.
Now, it's so interesting that you would have made a different choice for how many kids you wanted to have.
I'm glad you picked up on that one.
Yes, of course I would, because I think, in a sense, what I feel is that there's still a great sense of worry in our profession to talk about family and to talk about personal lives and what matters. So the fact that you would have gone back and consider a different family fabric, if you want, a different family balance, that's interesting to me. But my question is, in a sense, what does your daughter think you do? How does she understand the job that you're doing?
She thinks mommy sends a lot of emails all around the world, to quote her.
That's about it. I've also heard Mama's on TV.
Yeah, Mama's on TV too. No, what's cool about my daughter is that she really understands what it means to be a independent and professional woman. I remember, now she's in the 6th grade, but I think when she was in 4th grade, the teacher asked them, what do you want to do when you grow up, right? And 2 of the girls said, well, I want to work in a shop. And one of the boys was like, I want to be a policeman. And then it was Kiara's turn. She's like, I want to go to university. And the teacher was like, wow. and she's just extremely independent, eyes open to the world. Also because due to my job and to the fact that we're a multi cultural family, she's had a lot of exposure to different countries, different languages, etc. So I think it's good. I am also a better manager. I have my disrespectful subordinate at home, so it makes me a better manager and a more caring manager in the office as well. And it's, I have people or have had people on my team deal with losses of loved ones, deal with divorces, deal with, the normal things that happen in life. And when you're managing people, you need to also be human. And the only way to be human is to, have a life outside of work as well.
I will probably have to write that down to take it on. Let's move a bit on a couple of more questions, but maybe a bit more negative. What frustrates you the most when you think about the profession, about your position in PR and comms? If you think back of one of those stories and experiences you've been through, which one is the one that still annoys you now?
There will always be people in high positions in the organization that don't get it and treat comms like we're secretaries or people who put posters on the wall. And
how do we move out from that?
You move out from that by working with people who want to work with, and then start to show value. I mean, I'll give you an example from EIT Digital because it's an easy one. So we had these country directors in 9 countries in Europe, and it was very clear in terms of brand building that we had KPIs and whatnot, and that included doing serious PR, media, and et cetera work in all of the markets. And some of these country directors were willing to play the game, and some were not, right? And so what did I do? I got my team together, and the Italy guy Roberto is fantastic, was willing to play the game. And as I said, I was reporting, every single week at the management meeting. And so instead of saying, this country, without naming the name of the country, isn't doing jack, right? I'd be like, look, Roberto has, 3 tier 1 media interviews again this week, in Italy. And eventually, the French guy and the Spanish guy kind of take up. And then all of a sudden, only one country, Sweden, is left as the outlier. So instead of attacking and try, you can't make people love you. What you can do is you work and you add value and you add visible value and you take it from there.
So, trying to wrap up our conversation, if you were to think of how your career journey has been and the sort of qualities that you've acquired or you had from the beginning that brought you to here, how would you describe it?
Well, I think that I'm, persistent, determined, curious. That's what made me really good at my job when I was younger, articulate. I think with age and experience, I become wiser and I'm able to slow down a little bit. And I'm going to give another personal example now. So as I said, my company has been bought. We are in a transition period. We haven't closed the deal yet. And for regulatory reasons, we are not able to discuss jobs, who gets to keep a job, who doesn't, in which, of the 2 organizations. So I have no idea what the future will bring for me. I might have a job in the new company. I might have a job I hate in the new company. I may be laid off, right? And you know what? I'm completely zen with this. Now, if you talk to Edna 5 years ago, I would be like running up a tree, panicking, calling all the headhunters, trying to find a new job. And I have once before in my career, left a bad work situation too quickly, and things improved, and I would have been better had I stayed there. And this time I'm in this period of intense ambiguity. So, we're working so hard at the moment with this transaction, but I'm okay with it. And that's a really kind of special place to be. So, we can talk in 6 months and I'll let you know how things go, right?
Okay. Well, Edna, what I take from you is resilience, curiosity, patience, probably more than Zen, but also faith that things will work out. And with that, I thank you very, very much for your time today. And we'll definitely follow up in 6 months to a year to see where this has taken you.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much. And I am really honored that you wanted to include me in this process.
Thank you, Edna. We'll keep in touch.
Okay, bye.
Next time, we'll be discussing leadership in PR with my new guest, Ildiko Kovac. She's leading the global comms at Continental's Tire division. Women in PR is brought to you by Quadriga University of Applied Sciences in Berlin and professionalpodcast.com. To learn more about the show and my guests, do check out the show notes. And if you liked it, by all means, share it. If you have comments and suggestions, find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. My biggest thanks go to Migo Fecke and Regina Körner, my team at professionalpodcast.com. Without them, this podcast wouldn't be here now. I am Anna Adi. Thank you for listening.